Have you ever had someone look you straight in the eye and tell you that 10 years of your life meant absolutely nothing? That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago, standing in the back office of my family's restaurant, watching my parents count $4.2 million while telling me I didn't deserve a single cent. My name is Chen, and I'm 28 years old. For the past decade, I've been the invisible backbone of Golden Dragon, our family restaurant that started as a tiny hole in the wall and grew into the most successful Asian fusion spot in our entire city. While other people my age were building careers, traveling the world, or even just sleeping in on weekends, I was here. Every single day, managing inventory, training staff, creating marketing campaigns, developing new recipes, and basically running every aspect of this business while my parents took all the credit. But let me back up and introduce you to the cast of characters in this story, because you need to understand the family dynamics that made this betrayal so devastating. First, there's my father, Robert Chen. He's 55, immigrated from Taiwan 30 years ago with nothing but determination and a dream of owning his own business. Dad is what you'd call old school traditional. He believes children owe their parents everything, and that questioning his authority is the ultimate disrespect. He's the kind of man who can make you feel guilty for breathing his air if you cross him. Robert built Golden Dragon from the ground up, working 18-hour days in those early years, and he's never let anyone forget it. To him, family loyalty means sacrifice without question, and he genuinely believed he was entitled to my free labor because he put a roof over my head for 18 years. Then there's my mother, Linda Chen. She's 52, and if you've ever met someone who perfected the art of conflict avoidance, that's my mom. Linda loves me deeply, I know that, but she spent 30 years of marriage learning that agreeing with my father is easier than fighting him. Whenever I'd complain about working every holiday or missing important life events, she'd pat my hand and say, "You know how your father is, sweetheart." He doesn't mean to be harsh. This is just how immigrant families work. She's the master of gentle guilt trips wrapped in motherly concern. And finally, there's my younger brother, Jake. He's 25, and he's what I like to call the golden child who could do no wrong. While I was expected to sacrifice everything for the family business, Jake got to go to college, study engineering, land a great job at a tech company, and visit the restaurant maybe once a month for Sunday dinner. Don't get me wrong, I love my brother, and it's not his fault that my parents had completely different expectations for us. But watching him get praised for simply showing up while I worked 70-hour weeks for free was like swallowing glass every single time. For 10 years, I told myself this arrangement was temporary, just until the restaurant got stable, just until they could afford to hire a real manager, just until Jake graduated and could help out. But temporary became a decade of my life, and instead of appreciation, I got taken for granted. I missed my best friend's wedding because we had a busy Saturday night. I turned down dates because I couldn't commit to plans that might conflict with restaurant emergencies. I watched my college friends buy houses, get married, travel to Europe, while I drove the same beat-up Honda I'd had since high school, because every penny I might have earned went back into our family business. The breaking point came when I overheard my father talking to potential buyers, describing me as just our daughter who helps out sometimes. 10 years of my life reduced to helps out sometimes. But here's the thing about being underestimated for so long. You learn to be very, very quiet about what you're actually capable of. While my family saw me as just the obedient daughter who'd always be there, I was documenting everything. Every hour worked, every system I created, every recipe I developed, every client relationship I built. So when they sat me down after finalizing that $4.2 million sale and told me I was just the help who didn't deserve anything, I just smiled. Because I had been preparing for this moment longer than they could possibly imagine. I pulled out a folder that I'd been building for 2 years, placed it on the table between us, and watched their confident smiles disappear completely. What was in that folder changed everything. Let me take you back to where this all started. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school, with acceptance letters to 3 different colleges sitting on my desk. I had dreams of studying business management, maybe even opening my own marketing firm someday. But then my parents sat me down for what they called a family meeting. "Maya," my father said, using that serious tone that meant the conversation was already decided, We need your help with the restaurant, just for a year or two until we get established." Golden Dragon had just opened 6 months earlier in a strip mall between a laundromat and a tax office. It was tiny, maybe 30 seats, with mismatched furniture my parents had bought from a restaurant supply liquidation sale. The walls were painted this awful orange color that my mother insisted was warm and inviting, but really just looked like a traffic cone. My mother chimed in with her gentle manipulation. "Sweetheart, you know how hard it's been for us. Your father works so hard and we just need someone we can trust to help with the customers and the books. You're so good with people and your English is perfect. Here's the thing about immigrant parents. Their masters at making sacrifice sound like privilege. They positioned my giving up college as me being chosen for something special, something that proved how much they trusted and needed me." "What about Jake?" I asked, glancing at my brother, who was 15 at the time, sitting at the kitchen table pretending to do homework while obviously listening to every word. "Jake will go to college," my father said firmly. "He's going to be an engineer. But you, Maya, you have a gift for business. You can learn more working with us than sitting in some classroom." I remember looking at those college acceptance letters and feeling this pit in my stomach. But I also saw the exhaustion in my parents' eyes, the way my father's hands were already getting arthritis from prep work, how my mother had lost 15 pounds from stress. They had risked everything for this dream, and they were asking me to be part of it. So I said yes. I told myself it was temporary. I deferred college for 1 year, then another, then eventually stopped thinking about it altogether. Those first few years were actually kind of exciting. I threw myself into learning everything about restaurant operations. I redesigned our menu layout, started our social media presence, created a customer loyalty program, and even convinced my parents to let me paint over that horrible orange with a sophisticated sage green. The restaurant started thriving. We went from barely breaking even to having lines out the door on weekends. Local food bloggers started writing about us. We got featured in the city magazine as Best Hidden Gem. But here's what I didn't realize was happening. I was becoming invisible in my own success story. When customers complimented the food, my father took the credit. When business magazines wanted interviews about our growth, my parents were the ones photographed. When we won Best Asian Restaurant 3 years running, the trophy sat on their mantle at home, not in the restaurant where the work actually happened. My relationship with my father became this complicated dance of respect and resentment. He'd praise my work to my face, calling me his right hand, but then introduce me to suppliers as my daughter who helps out. He expected me to be available 24/7, but also reminded me constantly that I should be grateful for the opportunity to learn the business. My mother's role was to smooth over the rough edges of his demands. When I'd complain about working every holiday, she'd say, "Family businesses require sacrifice, honey. Look how successful we're becoming." When I'd mention wanting to take a vacation, she'd remind me how much my parents had given up when they immigrated here. Jake, meanwhile, was living the life I should have had. He graduated high school with honors, got into a great engineering program, joined a fraternity, studied abroad in Germany for a semester. He'd come home for holidays with stories about campus life, internships, career fairs, while I listened from behind the host stand, seating the next table. The worst part wasn't the work itself. I actually loved the restaurant industry. It was the gradual realization that I had been categorized. I wasn't being groomed to take over the business or become a partner. I was permanent staff who happened to share their DNA. By year 5, Golden Dragon wasn't just successful, it was a phenomenon. We had expanded to a second location, hired 43 employees, and were pulling in over $2 million in annual revenue. Food Network had featured us twice, and we had a waiting list for weekend reservations that stretched 3 weeks out. And I was running it all. While my parents handled the big picture, which mostly meant schmoozing with investors and appearing at ribbon cuttings, I was the one actually managing both locations. I created the staff schedules, negotiated with vendors, handled all the marketing, managed our social media presence, and even developed half the menu items that made us famous. But the more successful we became, the more I felt like I was disappearing. The breaking point started building during what should have been the happiest time in my life. I had been dating Marcus, this amazing guy I met at a small business networking event. He was a graphic designer who understood long hours and entrepreneurial stress. For the first time in years, I felt like I might actually have a chance at a normal relationship. Marcus had been planning this incredible surprise for my 27th birthday, a long weekend getaway to Napa Valley. He had booked this beautiful bed and breakfast, made dinner reservations at places I'd only dreamed about visiting. I was so excited, I could barely sleep. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, our head chef at the second location quit with no notice. My father called me at 6 in the morning, not even bothering with good morning. Maya, you need to get to the West Side location immediately. Chen quit, and we have 3 private parties booked this weekend. You're the only one who knows his recipes well enough to cover. Dad, it's my birthday weekend. I have plans. Can't we call in temporary help? The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, Maya, this is your family's business. Your personal plans don't matter when the restaurant is in crisis. Cancel whatever you're doing. I tried to explain about Marcus, about how important this was to me, about how I hadn't taken a real weekend off in over a year. But my father cut me off. If you're not at that restaurant in 1 hour, don't bother coming back at all. I chose the restaurant. I always chose the restaurant. Marcus was understanding that first time, but it wasn't the last time. Christmas Eve, when I had to stay late because we were booked solid and 2 servers called in sick. New Year's Eve, when I spent midnight balancing the books instead of kissing someone I loved. Valentine's Day, when I had to cancel our dinner plans because a kitchen fire at the main location required my attention. The final straw with Marcus came 8 months later. We were at his company's annual party, and I was actually having fun for once. I was wearing this beautiful dress I'd splurged on, feeling like a normal person for the first time in months. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. Maya, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you, but your father is in a panic. The health inspector showed up unexpectedly at the main location, and he can't find the updated permits. You know where everything is organized. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with this expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was pity. I have to go, I whispered. No, Maya, you don't have to go. You choose to go every single time. He was right, and we both knew it. Marcus broke up with me 2 weeks later, saying something that haunts me to this day. I can't compete with a restaurant that's slowly eating your soul. But the real gut punch came the next month during our annual family dinner. Jake had just gotten a promotion at his tech company, and my parents were practically glowing with pride. Our son, the senior engineer, my father boasted to the server, he's going to buy us a house in Florida when he makes partner. The server smiled and looked at me. And what do you do? Before I could answer, my father jumped in. Oh, Maya just helps us out at the restaurant. She's good with the day-to-day stuff. Just helps out. 10 years of my life. And I just help out. That night, I went home to my tiny studio apartment and realized I was 27 years old with no savings, no career outside the restaurant, and no life to speak of. My college friends were buying houses, getting married, building careers. I was still living paycheck to paycheck while generating millions in revenue for my family. The whispers started a few weeks later, employees mentioning potential buyers, vendors, asking if ownership was changing hands. When I confronted my parents directly, they dismissed my concerns like I was a child asking about adult business. Don't worry about things that don't concern you, Maya, my father said. Focus on your work. But I had been focusing on my work, and that work had built something worth $4.2 million. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday night in March. I was staying late at the main location, doing inventory and preparing the weekly staff schedule, when I heard voices coming from my father's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see him sitting across from 2 people in expensive suits. A man and a woman I'd never seen before. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you hear someone discussing your life's work, it's impossible not to listen. The operational systems are really what we're purchasing, the woman was saying, flipping through a thick folder. Your daughter, Maya, has built something remarkable here. The inventory management, staff training protocols, customer relationship database. It's more sophisticated than restaurants 3 times your size. My heart started pounding. They were talking about systems I had created, processes I had spent years perfecting. Maya's always been good with details, my father replied casually. Don't worry about staff transition, though. She'll train whoever you need, and then she can find her own path. It's time she moved on anyway. The man leaned forward. We'd actually like to retain her for at least 2 years. Her institutional knowledge is invaluable, and frankly, we're not sure the restaurants would maintain their success without her operational expertise. That won't be necessary, my father said firmly. Maya's been here long enough. She needs to build her own career now. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They were selling the restaurant, my restaurant, and planning to cut me out completely. Not only that, but they were actively refusing offers that would have secured my future. I quietly slipped away and drove home in a daze. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that woman's words. Maya has built something remarkable. For the first time, I heard someone outside my family acknowledge what I had actually accomplished. The next morning, I made a decision that would change my life forever. Instead of confronting my parents directly, I was going to be strategic. If they wanted to treat me like just an employee, then I was going to start thinking like one, an employee who deserved fair compensation and recognition. I started with research. I spent my lunch breaks at the library learning about employment law, unpaid wages, and intellectual property rights. I discovered that in our state, even family members are entitled to minimum wage for work performed, and that I could potentially claim ownership of systems and processes I had developed. But research wasn't enough. I needed documentation. I began what I called Operation Paper Trail. Every morning, I'd arrive 30 minutes early to print and organize records. I copied every email where my parents had acknowledged my contributions or described my responsibilities. I photographed the handwritten recipe cards for dishes I had created, the Korean fusion tacos that became our signature item, the 5-spice duck that Food Network had featured, the innovative cocktail menu that doubled our bar revenue. I documented my work hours using old schedules and calendar entries, cross-referencing them with security camera logs that showed me arriving first and leaving last almost every day for 10 years. I calculated that I had worked an average of 65 hours per week for a decade, with only 2 actual vacation days. The most crucial evidence came from an unexpected source. Our bookkeeper, Mrs. Patterson, had been watching this whole situation unfold with growing concern. She was a sweet woman in her 60s who had been doing our books for 8 years. "Maya, honey," she said one afternoon, "I don't know what your parents are thinking, but you should know that I've been marking your contributions in my notes for years. When auditors ask about operational improvements, I always tell them it was you." Mrs. Patterson helped me gather financial records showing the restaurant's growth trajectory, which clearly correlated with my increasing responsibilities. We documented how revenue had grown from $400,000 in year 1 to over $2 million annually, with the steepest growth occurring after I took over marketing and operations. Then came the legal consultation. I found an employment attorney who specialized in family business disputes. Sarah Martinez was sharp, experienced, and most importantly, she didn't think I was crazy. "Maya," she said after reviewing my documentation, "you have a stronger case than you realize. The intellectual property issues alone could be worth hundreds of thousands. But more importantly, you have leverage they don't know about." "What do you mean?" "From what you've told me about the buyers, they specifically want to retain your systems and your expertise. Your parents can't deliver what they've promised without you, and you have no obligation to cooperate with a sale that doesn't fairly compensate you." That's when I understood the true power of what I had been building for 2 years. This wasn't just about getting paid for past work. This was about controlling my own future. The folder was ready. My strategy was set. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to use it. 3 weeks later, my parents called a family meeting. Not at home, at the restaurant in our private dining room, with Jake driving down from the city for the occasion. I knew this was it. The champagne bottle sitting on ice was a dead giveaway. "Maya, Jake," my father began, his chest puffed out with pride, "your mother and I have an announcement that's going to change all our lives." My mother was practically glowing, clutching a folder that I assumed contained the sale documents. Jake looked confused, but excited. And me? I sat there with my own folder resting calmly in my lap, my heart pounding, but my face completely composed. "We've sold Golden Dragon," my father announced dramatically. "Both locations for $4.2 million. Jake's jaw dropped. Holy shit, Dad, that's incredible. Language, my mother scolded, but she was beaming. We close next month. The buyers are a restaurant investment group from Chicago. They love everything about our operation. My father turned to Jake first, naturally. Son, this means you'll never have to worry about us financially. Your mother and I can retire comfortably, maybe buy that condo in Florida we've been talking about. Then he looked at me, and his expression shifted to something that was supposed to be paternal concern, but felt more like pity. Maya, sweetheart, I know this might be hard for you. This restaurant has been your whole world for so long, but honestly, it's time. You're 28 years old. You need to go out there and build your own career, find your own path. We can't keep you here forever. My mother jumped in with her signature gentle manipulation. We'll give you an excellent reference, honey, and don't worry about money. We'll make sure you have something to get started with. Maybe a few thousand to help with the transition. A few thousand for 10 years of my life. You've been such a good daughter, my father continued, always willing to help out when we needed you. But now it's time for you to spread your wings. The new owners seem nice. They said they'd be happy to give you a job if you want to stay in the restaurant business, but honestly, Maya, you're smart enough to do anything. Jake was looking between my parents and me, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. Wait, what about Maya's role in all this? I mean, she basically runs these places. My father waved his hand dismissively. Maya's been a great help, but she's just an employee, son. This is a business transaction between the owners and the buyers. She doesn't really factor into the financial side of things. Just an employee, after everything. That's when I spoke for the first time since sitting down. Actually, I said quietly, placing my folder on the table, I think there are a few things we need to discuss before you finalize anything. My father frowned. Maya, this isn't really your concern. Oh, but it is. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. See, I've been doing some research, and it turns out that even family members are entitled to fair compensation for their work, especially when that work spans 10 years and generates millions in revenue. The room went dead silent. My mother's smile faltered. Jake leaned forward, suddenly very interested. I've calculated my unpaid wages based on the market rate for a general manager with my responsibilities, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. That comes to approximately $847,000 over 10 years, not including overtime or benefits. My father's face was turning red. Maya, you can't be serious. We provided for you. I moved out 3 years ago, Dad, and I have documentation. I pulled out the next set of papers. Intellectual property claims on 15 signature recipes that I developed, including the fusion tacos and 5-spice duck that your buyers specifically mentioned as key selling points. My mother was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Maya, don't be ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you what I've done for you. I spread out photographs of handwritten recipes, printed emails, financial reports, and time logs across the table. I created the operational systems your buyers are purchasing. I developed the marketing strategies that tripled your revenue. I built the customer database that's worth more than your equipment. And according to the conversation I overheard 3 weeks ago, your buyers specifically wanted to retain me because they know this place can't succeed without my institutional knowledge. Jake was staring at the documents in shock. Maya, is this all true? But here's the really interesting part, I continued, ignoring my parents' increasingly panicked expressions. I spoke with the buyers yesterday. Turns out they're having second thoughts about the purchase without guaranteed operational continuity. They want me to sign a 2-year consulting agreement. I pulled out the final document and placed it in front of my father, which I'm happy to do for the right price, $1.2 million from the sale proceeds, plus a $600,000 consulting fee. That's roughly what I should have earned all along. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's hands were shaking as he stared at the papers. My mother looked like she might faint. Finally, Jake spoke. Maya, you're a fucking genius. The negotiation that followed was unlike anything I could have imagined. My father, who had spent 10 years treating me like hired help, suddenly became a desperate businessman trying to salvage a deal worth millions. The transformation was almost comical if it wasn't so vindicating. "Maya, let's be reasonable here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "We're family. We can work something out that's fair for everyone." Fair for everyone. Now he wanted to talk about fairness. My mother tried a different approach, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Sweetheart, you're being so aggressive. This isn't like you. Maybe we should all take some time to cool down and discuss this properly." But I was done being the accommodating daughter. "Actually, Mom, this is exactly like me. You just never bothered to notice because it was easier to see me as someone who would never stand up for herself." The buyers, Richardson Restaurant Group, were surprisingly professional about the whole situation. When I called them directly the next day, their lead investor, Patricia Richardson, was almost amused. "Maya, we've been hoping you'd reach out," she said. "Frankly, we were concerned about your parents' insistence that you wouldn't be staying on. Your operational systems are a huge part of what we're purchasing." Within a week, we had reached an agreement that changed my life forever. I received $1.2 million from the sale proceeds. My parents had to restructure their entire retirement plan, but honestly, that wasn't my problem anymore. The consulting contract with Richardson Group paid me $300,000 per year for 2 years, with an option to extend or transition into a permanent executive role. But the money, as incredible as it was, wasn't the most important change. The real transformation was in how my family treated me. My father, who had never once asked for my opinion on business decisions, suddenly wanted to understand how I had built such detailed documentation. "Maya, I had no idea you were keeping track of everything so thoroughly," he said during one of our post-negotiation conversations. That's actually brilliant business practice." For the first time in my adult life, I heard respect in his voice when he talked about my work. My mother took longer to come around. She was hurt that I had been plotting behind their backs, as she put it. But 3 months later, when she saw me in my new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom with a view of the city that I could actually afford, she finally said what I'd been waiting 10 years to hear. "Maya, I owe you an apology. I knew your father was taking advantage of your loyalty, but I told myself it was just how families work. I was wrong. I should have stood up for you years ago." Jake became my biggest champion. He told everyone who would listen about his badass sister who outsmarted everyone and got what she deserved. He even asked me to help him negotiate his next promotion, saying he wanted to learn how to advocate for himself the way I had. But perhaps the most satisfying change was professional. With my settlement money and newfound confidence, I started Chen Consulting, specializing in helping family businesses create fair compensation structures and operational systems. Turns out my story wasn't unique. There are thousands of family members trapped in similar situations, giving their lives to businesses that treat them as disposable. My first client was a woman named Sarah, whose family had been running a successful catering company for 15 years while paying her nothing but room and board. Using the strategies I had developed, we documented her contributions and negotiated a $400,000 settlement plus a 25% ownership stake. I've now helped over 30 families navigate these complicated dynamics, and every success feels like a small victory against the kind of exploitation I endured. 6 months after that confrontation in the restaurant, Richardson Group offered me a permanent position as Director of Operations for their entire West Coast portfolio. I'm managing 12 restaurants now, making more money than I ever dreamed possible. And most importantly, I'm finally building the career I should have had all along. The relationship with my parents will never be the same, but honestly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We have boundaries now. Respect. When they talk about my work, they use words like brilliant and strategic instead of helpful. Marcus reached out last month. He's engaged to someone else now, but he wanted to tell me how proud he was of what I'd accomplished. "You found your backbone," he said. "I always knew it was there." Here's what I learned from this whole experience. Your biggest weakness can become your greatest strength if you're smart enough to document the journey. For 10 years, everyone saw my loyalty and work ethic as something they could exploit. But those same qualities, when combined with strategic thinking, became the foundation of my liberation. If you're in a situation where family or anyone else is taking advantage of your loyalty, start keeping records. Know your worth. And remember, just because someone says they love you doesn't mean they have the right to exploit you. Sometimes the people who claim to care about you most are the ones who need to learn how to respect you. And sometimes, teaching them that lesson is the greatest gift you can give yourself. That folder didn't just contain documents, it contained 10 years of proof that I was never just the help. It was evidence of my worth, my contributions, and my right to be treated with respect and fairness. Looking back now, I realize that every spreadsheet I created, every late night I worked, every sacrifice I made wasn't wasted. It was all building toward that moment when I could finally stand up and say, actually, you're wrong, and here's the proof. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt taken for granted by family, employers, or anyone else in your life, I want you to know that your voice matters. Your contributions have value, and it's never too late to start documenting your worth and demanding the respect you deserve. Maybe you're working in a family business right now, wondering if you're being treated fairly. Maybe you're in a job where your boss takes credit for your ideas. Maybe you're in a relationship where your efforts go unnoticed and unappreciated. Whatever your situation, remember this: knowledge is power, documentation is evidence, and standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. The hardest part isn't gathering the courage to confront someone. The hardest part is believing that you deserve better. But you do. Trust me, you absolutely do. Before you go, I have a favor to ask. If this story inspired you, motivated you, or even just entertained you for the last 20 minutes, please hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like this one, and honestly, knowing that my experience can help others makes everything I went through feel worth it. And if you want to hear more stories about people who stood up for themselves, who fought back against unfair treatment, or who turned their biggest challenges into their greatest victories, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. I share new stories every week, and I promise each one will leave you feeling empowered and ready to take on whatever challenges you're facing. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you? How did you handle it? Or maybe you're dealing with something similar right now and need some encouragement. This community is here to support each other, so don't be shy about sharing your story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a friend who's been taken advantage of at work, a family member who's struggling to find their voice, or anyone who needs a reminder that they have more power than they realize. Remember, your story isn't over yet. Your best chapter might be the one you write after you decide you deserve better. Until next time, keep standing up for yourself, keep documenting your worth, and never let anyone convince you that you're just the help. You're so much more than that, and it's time the world knew it.